Before we begin, if you enjoy these deep dives into unexplained phenomena, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps more than you know. Now, let's talk about something that's been keeping people awake at night. In recent years, sleep researchers have documented something unusual. Not quite a disorder. Not quite a dream. Something in between. People across different continents, different time zones, different lives, have begun reporting the same strange experience. But here's what makes it unsettling. They don't call it a dream. They call it a gap. A missing piece. Something they can't remember, but know was there. It started appearing on forums around 2021. Small posts. Scattered. People asking if anyone else had woken up feeling like they'd forgotten something important. Not a task. Not an appointment. A place. One user wrote, "I woke up at 3:17 a.m. and I knew I'd been somewhere. But I can't picture it. It's like trying to remember a word that's on the tip of your tongue, except it's an entire room." Another wrote, "Does anyone else feel like they've been in the same empty space while sleeping? I don't dream about it. I just know I was there." The posts were dismissed at first. Sleep paralysis. Hypnagogic hallucinations. Stress. But the reports kept coming, and the details started overlapping. By 2022, researchers began noticing something. The people describing this phenomenon weren't using the same words, but they were describing the same absence. Here's what they reported. A room. Or something like a room. No windows. Or maybe there were windows, but they didn't show anything. Silence. But not complete silence. A hum. A pressure. Like standing too close to a speaker that isn't playing anything. A door. But no one could say where it was. And the time. Almost everyone woke up between 3 and 4 a.m. One participant in a sleep study said, "I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember waking up. But I remember knowing I had to leave. I just didn't know where I was leaving from." Another said, "It wasn't scary while it was happening. It's scary now, because I can't explain why I wasn't scared." There were other consistencies. Small things. Things people didn't think to mention until they were asked directly. A phone. Nearly every person mentioned their phone. Not that they used it. Not that they saw it. But that it should have been there. And it wasn't. One woman from the Midwest described it this way. "I reached for my phone when I woke up. My hand went to the nightstand automatically. But I realized I'd been looking for it before that. While I was asleep. Like I needed to check something, but couldn't find it." A man from Northern Europe said, "I had this feeling that my phone was in the other room. But there was no other room. Just the space I was in. And I couldn't move toward it." Then there were the clocks. Digital clocks, specifically. Multiple people reported the same thing. They would wake up and immediately look at the clock. 3:14 a.m. 3:22 a.m. 3:40 wind a.m. Always in them window. But when asked if they remembered seeing a clock in the space they couldn't remember, they hesitated. "I think there was one," someone said. "But I don't know where it was. Or what it said. I just knew I had to check the time." One researcher conducting interviews noted something strange. When people talked about this experience, they used the present tense. Not "I was there," but "I'm there." As if some part of them still was. The phenomenon didn't spread like a virus. It didn't follow social networks or geographic clusters. It appeared randomly. A college student in Tokyo, a retired teacher in rural Canada, a software engineer in Berlin, a nurse in Sao Paulo. No connection between them. No shared media consumption. No common medications or health conditions. The only pattern was the gap, the absence, the feeling of having been somewhere they couldn't describe. A journalist began collecting testimonies. Over 6 months, she gathered nearly 200 accounts. She published them on a dedicated website, hoping someone would find a connection. What she found instead was more unsettling. The accounts were nearly identical in structure. People would describe waking up, the time, the feeling of displacement, the missing phone, the silence that wasn't quite silence. But when pressed for more details, they couldn't provide them. It was as if the experience had a shape, but no content. A frame with no picture. One testimony stood out. A woman in her 30s wrote, "I don't think it's a dream. Dreams fade. This doesn't fade. It just sits there, behind everything. Like a room I've always lived in but never noticed. And now I can't stop noticing that I can't see it." Another person described it differently. "It's like watching a movie where someone pauses it, cuts out 10 minutes, and then resumes. You don't know what you missed, but you know something's missing. You can feel the edit." By 2023, the testimonies had reached over 1,000. Sleep clinics began seeing patients specifically asking about this phenomenon. Most were healthy. No sleep disorders. No trauma. No neurological abnormalities. They simply wanted to know if anyone else had experienced it. And when told that yes, many others had, they didn't seem relieved. They seemed more disturbed. "It means it's real," one patient said. "If it's just me, it's in my head. But if it's everyone, then where is it?" The question didn't make sense to the clinician at the time. But later, reading through the case notes, she understood. The patient wasn't asking where the experience was happening. They were asking where the place was. The room. The space. The gap. Some people began trying to induce the experience. They would set alarms for 3 a.m., lie in bed, close their eyes, try to find the room. Most reported nothing. But a few said they felt close. "I could sense the edges of it," one wrote. "Like putting your hand near a wall in the dark. You can't see it, but you know it's there." One man claimed he got inside. He described lying in bed, eyes closed, focusing on the hum, the pressure. And then, he said, he was there, in the space. He couldn't describe it. He tried. He said it was like trying to describe a color that doesn't exist. But he knew he was there, and he knew he wasn't alone. When asked what he meant by that, he said, "I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anyone. But I felt observed. Not watched. Observed. Like I was a data point." He never tried again. The online communities grew. Forums. Subreddits. Discord servers. People sharing their experiences. Comparing notes. Trying to find meaning. Some believed it was a shared unconscious, a collective memory. Others thought it was a glitch in reality. A few insisted it was something being done to them. An experiment. A test. One popular theory was that it wasn't a dream at all. It was a memory. But not of something that happened. A memory of something that was taken. "We're not remembering the room," someone wrote. "We're remembering that we forgot." The theory gained traction. It explained the consistency, the absence, the feeling of missing something without knowing what it was. If everyone had lost the same memory, they would all describe the loss the same way. The shape of the gap would be identical. But that raised another question. If something was taken, who took it and why? A neurologist studying the phenomenon proposed a different explanation. She suggested that the brain, during certain sleep stages, creates a default space, a neutral environment where memory consolidation occurs. Normally, people don't remember this space because it's not meant to be remembered. It's a backdrop. But for some reason, possibly due to a shift in sleep architecture caused by modern stressors, people were becoming partially aware of it. They weren't remembering a dream. They were remembering the process of dreaming. The theory was compelling, but it didn't explain why people felt disturbed by it. If it was just a neutral space, why did it feel like something was wrong? One psychologist offered another perspective. She argued that the disturbance came not from the space itself, but from the realization that consciousness doesn't turn off. Even in deep sleep, some part of the brain is awake, observing, processing, and that part exists in a place most people never access. The reports, she said, were describing a moment when people accidentally became aware of that place. And the disturbance came from realizing they'd been there all along. Every night. For their entire lives. It's not that the room is new, she explained. It's that they finally noticed it. And now they can't stop noticing. But even that didn't account for the shared details. The phone. The door. The time. If it was a personal neurological process, why were the experiences so similar? One investigator decided to approach it differently. Instead of asking what the experience was, he asked what it wasn't. He gathered all the testimonies and looked for what people didn't report. And he found something interesting. No one reported color. No one reported temperature. No one reported texture. It was as if the space existed without sensory properties. Just structure. Just presence. He also noted that no one reported movement. People described being in the space, but not entering it or leaving it. They were simply there, and then they weren't. As if the experience existed outside of time. Another detail, no one reported fear while in the space. The fear came after. Upon waking. Upon realizing they couldn't remember. The space itself, according to every account, felt neutral. Empty. Waiting. Waiting for what a computer scientist suggested: a digital explanation. He proposed that if consciousness could be thought of as software running on biological hardware, then perhaps the space was something like a loading screen. A buffer. A place the mind goes while transitioning between states. The reason it felt empty, he argued, was because it was empty. It was a holding space. And the reason people were noticing it now was because something was taking longer to load. Some process was slowing down. Think of it like this, he wrote. You're on a website. You click a link. Normally, the next page loads instantly. But sometimes, there's a delay. And you see the blank screen. The space between pages. That's what people are experiencing. The delay. But what was causing the delay? No one had an answer. By 2024, the phenomenon had a name. The waiting room. Not because anyone had named it officially, but because that's what people started calling it. The place you go while your brain processes something. The place between sleep and waking. The place that's always been there, but no one noticed. Except now, people were noticing. And they couldn't stop. A documentary crew decided to investigate. They interviewed dozens of people, set up sleep studies, monitored brain activity. They found nothing abnormal. The people experiencing the phenomenon had perfectly normal sleep patterns. No disruptions, no anomalies. And yet, when woken during certain stages, they reported the same thing. The room, the silence, the absence. One participant, a middle-aged man from the South, described it in detail during a monitored session. "I'm there right now," he said, eyes still closed. "I can feel it. It's not dark. It's not light. It's just nothing. But I'm standing. Or I think I'm standing. I don't have a body, but I'm aware of space around me. And there's something I'm supposed to do. But I don't know what it is." The researchers asked him to describe more. He continued, "There's a door. I can't see it, but I know it's there. Behind me. Or in front of me, I don't know. Direction doesn't work here. And I keep thinking I should open it. But I can't move. Or maybe I don't want to." They asked why. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because if I open it, I'll see what's on the other side. And I don't think I'm supposed to see that yet." When he woke up, he didn't remember saying any of it. He only remembered the feeling, the waiting. Another participant, a young woman, had a different experience. During her monitored session, she became distressed. Her heart rate spiked. Her breathing quickened. But she didn't wake up. The researchers considered intervening, but before they could, she calmed down. When they woke her, she was disoriented. "I tried to leave," she said. "I tried to find the door. But every time I moved toward it, the room got bigger. Or I got smaller. I couldn't reach it." She didn't sleep for 3 days after that. The documentary was never finished. The footage was deemed too disturbing. Not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't show. Hours of people lying still, brain activity normal, vital stable. But their words, when transcribed, painted a picture of something no one could explain. A shared space, a shared absence, a shared waiting. One researcher, after reviewing all the footage, made a comment that was later cut from the final edit. She said, "What if they're not describing a place? What if they're describing a moment, the moment right before something happens? And we're all stuck in it?" By late 2024, something changed. The reports began to shift. People were still experiencing the phenomenon, but now they were reporting something new. A sound. Not a hum. Not pressure. A sound. Faint. Distant. Like something moving. Or breathing. One person described it as footsteps. But not regular footsteps. "It's like someone walking in a room above you," they said. But there's no room above you. And they're not walking toward anything. They're just walking. Pacing. Another described it as a door opening. But not the door in the room. A different door. Somewhere else. "I heard it creak," they said. "And then I felt air. Like a draft. But there's no air in that place. There's nothing." The testimonies became more unsettling. People reported the feeling of being approached. Not by a person. Not by a thing. Just approached. It's like when you're alone in your house and you hear a floorboard creak, someone wrote. You know it's probably nothing. But you also know it might not be nothing. And you're stuck in that moment. That's what the room feels like now. That moment. Stretched out forever. One night in November, a woman in her 40s woke up at 3:26 a.m. She described the usual experience. The room. The silence. The missing phone. But this time, she said, something was different. She wasn't alone. She couldn't see anyone. Couldn't hear anyone. But she knew. The way you know when someone is standing behind you. The way you know when you're being watched. She tried to wake up. Couldn't. Tried to move. Couldn't. She was stuck. In the room. With whatever else was there. And then, she said, she felt it. A hand. On her shoulder. Not pressing. Not grabbing. Just resting. Like someone making sure she stayed. When she finally woke up, she was standing in her kitchen. She didn't remember getting out of bed. Didn't remember walking. She was just there. Barefoot. In the dark. Staring at the wall. Her husband found her 20 minutes later. She was still standing. Still staring. When he touched her, she flinched. I couldn't find the door, she said. I couldn't find the door. She refused to elaborate. She refused to sleep. 3 days later, she checked herself into a hospital. The doctors found nothing wrong, but she insisted she couldn't go back. Back where? They asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the ceiling, waiting. Others began reporting similar experiences, waking up in different parts of their homes. No memory of moving. No explanation. Just the room. And the feeling that something had followed them out. The forums exploded. Theories multiplied. Some people stopped sleeping altogether. Others tried sleeping in groups, hoping safety in numbers would help. It didn't. The room didn't care how many people were in the bed. It found them anyway. One man set up cameras in his bedroom, hoping to catch himself sleepwalking, hoping for an explanation. The footage showed him lying still for hours. Then, at 3:32 a.m., he sat up. Slowly. Mechanically. He turned his head toward the camera, stared directly into it, for 47 seconds. Then he lay back down. In the morning, he had no memory of it. But when he watched the footage, he said he recognized the look on his face. That's not me, he said. That's how I look in the room. That's my face when I'm waiting. A team of scientists proposed a study. They wanted to scan people's brains while they experienced the phenomenon, map the neural activity, find the source. But they couldn't get approval. Too risky, the ethics board said. Too many unknowns. What if the scans triggered something? What if observing the phenomenon changed it? One of the scientists on the team said in an interview, "We're approaching this like it's a neurological event. But what if it's not? What if it's something we're not equipped to study? What if the tools we have can't measure what's actually happening?" By December 2024, the reports reached a peak. Tens of thousands of people worldwide were experiencing it. And the details were becoming more specific, more disturbing. People weren't just describing the room anymore. They were describing what was in it. Not objects, not furniture, not anything tangible, but presence, shape, movement, One person described seeing a shadow, not cast by anything, just a shadow, standing, watching. Another described hearing a voice, not words, just the shape of a voice, the impression of something being said without sound. And then, the children started talking. Children who had never heard of the phenomenon. Children too young to read the forums or watch the videos. They started waking up at 3 a.m., crying, saying they didn't want to go back to the empty place, saying there was someone there, someone waiting. Parents tried to comfort them, tried to explain it was just a dream. But the children insisted. It's not a dream, they said. Dreams end. This doesn't end. I'm always there. Even when I'm awake. I can feel it. One child, a 6-year-old boy, drew a picture. His mother posted it online. The picture showed a room. 4 walls. No windows. No door. And in the center, a stick figure. But the stick figure wasn't alone. There was another shape. Larger. Undefined. Hovering. The boy had written a caption at the bottom in crayon. He's waiting for us to remember. The post went viral. Thousands of people commented. Many said their children had drawn similar pictures, similar shapes, similar words. One parent wrote, "My daughter drew the same thing, but she added something. She drew a door, and she said the door is ours. We just forgot how to open it." A psychologist analyzing the children's drawings noted something unsettling. The shapes in the pictures, the undefined forms, they weren't random. They followed a pattern, a structure, as if the children were all seeing the same thing, as if they were all drawing from the same memory. But whose memory? A philosopher joined the conversation. She proposed that the phenomenon wasn't about sleep at all. It was about consciousness. She argued that consciousness, at its core, exists in a shared space, a field, a network. And sleep is when individuals access that space most directly. What people were experiencing, she suggested, was the infrastructure of consciousness itself. The place where all minds connect. And something about modern life, stress, technology, isolation, was making that place visible, tangible, undeniable. We've always been there, she said. In that room. Together. We just didn't know it. Now we do. And we can't unknow it. But if that was true, what was the shape? What was the presence? What was waiting? She didn't have an answer. No one did. In early 2025, a journalist published an article titled "The Room We All Share." It detailed the phenomenon, the testimonies, the theories, but it also included something new, a survey. She asked readers, "Do you remember the room, and if so, do you remember anything else?" Over 10,000 people responded. 93% said yes, they remembered. Or rather, they felt they should remember. They felt the absence, the gap. But 7% said something different. They said they remembered more than the room. They remembered the door. And they remembered what was on the other side. The article published their responses verbatim. They were brief, cryptic, disturbing. One person wrote, "There's nothing on the other side. That's the problem." Another wrote, "It's not a door. It's a choice. And we already made it. We just don't remember making it." A third wrote, "Stop asking about the room. The room is fine. It's what comes after the room. That's what we should be worried about. The article ended with a question. If this is happening to all of us, if we're all going to the same place every night, what happens when we all decide to open the door at the same time? No one answered. But the number of people reporting the phenomenon began to drop. Not because it stopped happening, but because people stopped talking about it. The forums went quiet. The posts disappeared. The conversations ended, as if everyone had collectively decided that some things are better left unexamined, some doors better left closed. But the phenomenon didn't stop. People still woke up at 3 a.m., still felt the gap, still reached for their phones, still knew they'd been somewhere. They just stopped trying to understand it, stopped trying to explain it. They accepted it, the way you accept that you dream, the way you accept that you forget. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the room, the waiting, the presence, maybe it was always there. Maybe it's always been part of sleep, part of being human, part of the price we pay for consciousness. We go there every night. We wait. We forget. And we wake up. And we do it again. Except now, some people can't forget. Some people remember just enough to know they're forgetting. And that's worse. Because forgetting is easy. But knowing you've forgotten, feeling the shape of what's missing, that stays with you. That follows you. Even when you're awake. One of the last posts on the largest forum, before it went silent, was from an anonymous user. It was short. Just 3 sentences. I don't think we're supposed to remember. I think the room is a mercy. It's the place we go to forget what we saw. What did we see? No one knows. Or maybe everyone knows, and they just can't say. Can't put it into words. Can't bring it back across the threshold. It lives in the gap. In the space between sleep and waking. In the room with no door. Or maybe with a door no one wants to open. And every night, when you close your eyes, you go there. You've always gone there. You just never noticed. Until now. Now you can feel it. The edges. The hum. The pressure. The waiting. You're there right now. In the back of your mind. In the space you can't quite picture. And something is there with you. Not hostile. Not kind. Just present. Just observing. Just waiting. Waiting for you to remember. Or waiting for you to forget. It doesn't matter which. Because either way, you're there. You've always been there. And you'll go back tonight. And the night after. And the night after that. Because the room isn't something you visit. It's something you are. It's the place between thoughts. The silence between heartbeats. The gap in your memory. It's the architecture of your mind. And you can't escape it. Because it's you. And when you wake up tomorrow at 3:23 a.m., when you reach for your phone and it's not where you left it, when you feel the absence, the gap, the thing you can't quite name, you'll know. You were there. In the room. Waiting. And something was waiting with you. You just don't remember what it was. Or maybe you do. Maybe you remember perfectly. You're just too afraid to admit it. Because admitting it means accepting that the room is real. That the presence is real. That every night, when you close your eyes, you're not alone. You never have been. And you never will be. So tonight, when you fall asleep, pay attention. Notice the moment. The transition. The gap. Feel the edges of the room. The silence that isn't silence. The door you can't find. And ask yourself, am I waiting for something, or is something waiting for me? Because the answer, whatever it is, has always been there. In the room. In the gap. In the place you go every night and forget every morning. Until now. Now you remember. Or at least, you remember that you forgot. And that's enough. That's all it takes. To feel it, to know it, to realize that sleep isn't rest. It's a journey to a place we all share, a place we've always shared, a place that's been waiting for us to notice it. And now that we have, now that we can't unknow it, what happens next? What happens when we all open the door? There's a theory among some of the researchers who've been following this. They don't talk about it publicly, but in private conversations, late at night, after too many coffees and not enough sleep, they admit something. They think the phenomenon is accelerating. Not in frequency, in depth. People are going deeper into the room, staying longer, bringing more back with them. One researcher keeps a private log. She documents cases that don't fit the standard pattern. Cases where people report more than just the room, more than just the absence. They report details, specific details, things that shouldn't be possible to remember because they never existed to begin with. One case involves a woman who woke up and immediately wrote down a sequence of numbers. 23 digits. She had no idea what they meant. No idea why she wrote them. But she felt compelled to. Like if she didn't, something would be lost. The numbers were random. No pattern. No meaning. But when another person, 2,000 miles away, reported the same sequence 3 days later, the researchers started paying closer attention. Another case involved a man who described architectural details, measurements, angles, proportions. He wasn't an architect, wasn't the designer, but he drew blueprints, detailed blueprints of a structure that doesn't exist. And when those blueprints were shown to an actual architect, they were shocked. This is impossible, they said. These proportions shouldn't work. This structure would collapse. But the math is perfect. Whoever designed this understood something about physics that we don't. The blueprints were shown to other people experiencing the phenomenon. 12 out of 15 recognized them. That's the room, they said. Not that it looked like the room. That it was the room. The mathematical expression of the space they couldn't describe. A linguist became involved. She noticed that people describing the phenomenon used specific grammatical structures. Structures that don't exist in their native languages. When analyzed, these structures resembled something ancient, pre-linguistic, the way early humans might have communicated before language fully developed, or the way consciousness might communicate with itself before words get in the way. She recorded hundreds of interviews, transcribed them, analyzed them, and found something disturbing. The longer someone experienced the phenomenon, the more their speech patterns changed. Small shifts at first. A word here, a phrase there. But over time, the changes accumulated. People started speaking in rhythms that matched, as if they were all learning the same language. A language of gaps, of absences, of things that exist in the spaces between words. One participant in her study said something that stuck with her. They said, "I'm not forgetting how to speak my language. I'm remembering how to speak the other one. The one from the room. And it doesn't use words. It uses the spaces where words should be. a group of physicists took interest. They approached the phenomenon from a different angle. If consciousness exists in a shared space, if that space is accessible during sleep, then perhaps it has physical properties. Perhaps it can be measured, mapped, understood. They developed a hypothesis. What if the room isn't metaphorical? What if it's a real place, not in physical space, but in a different kind of space, a space that consciousness occupies the same way matter occupies physical space? And what if sleep is simply the state where consciousness shifts its attention from physical space to this other space? They couldn't test it directly, but they could look for indirect evidence, correlations, patterns in brain activity, electromagnetic signatures, anything that might indicate a shared underlying structure. They found something. During the time window when people reported being in the room, 3 to 4 a.m., there was a measurable change in global brain activity patterns. Not in individuals, in populations. Across different locations, different demographics, brain activity showed subtle but consistent synchronization, as if millions of minds were tuning to the same frequency. The effect was weak, easy to dismiss as noise, but it was there, and it was consistent. Night after night, in that specific window, human consciousness showed a pattern of coordination that had no obvious explanation. One physicist proposed a radical idea. What if the room isn't a place we go? What if it's a place we're always in? What if physical reality and the room coexist, occupying the same space, and consciousness simply shifts its attention between them during waking hours? We focus on physical reality. During sleep, especially during that 3 to 4 a.m. window, our focus shifts, and we become aware of the room, the substrate, the foundation upon which physical reality is built. Think of it like a stage, he explained. When you watch a play, you see the actors, the set, the props, but you don't see the stage itself. You don't see the foundation holding everything up. The room might be that foundation, and for some reason, people are starting to look down, starting to see the stage instead of the play. But that raised a more unsettling question. If the room is the foundation, what happens if people pay too much attention to it? What happens if they stop focusing on the play and only see the stage? Do they disappear from the play? Do they fall through? There have been cases, not many, but enough to be concerning. People who go to sleep and don't wake up. Not medically. They're still alive, still breathing, heart still beating, but they don't wake up. They're there, in their beds, eyes closed, vitals stable, but they're not present. It's as if they went into the room and didn't come back. One hospital documented a case like this. A man in his 50s, no medical history, no risk factors. He went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up. Days passed, then weeks. He remained in a stable state. Not a coma, not brain dead, just asleep. Except when they monitored his brain activity, it showed patterns consistent with waking consciousness. He was aware. He was thinking. He just wasn't in his body anymore. Family members reported something strange. They said that when they sat with him, they felt something. A presence. Not in the room with them, but close. Adjacent. Like he was standing just behind a door they couldn't see. One night, his daughter fell asleep in the chair next to his bed. She woke up at 3:19 a.m. and she knew. Her father was in the room, the waiting room, and he wasn't alone. She couldn't see him, couldn't hear him, but she felt him, and she felt something else, something that was with him, Something that had always been there, waiting. And now it had what it wanted. She ran from the hospital, drove home, refused to go back. Her father remained in his state for 6 more weeks. Then, one night, he woke up, sat up in bed, looked around, and said one word, empty. When asked what he meant, he didn't answer. He just repeated it. Empty. Over and over. Until the nurses sedated him. He hasn't spoken since. He's awake now. Eyes open. Responsive to basic commands. But the person he was is gone. What came back is something else. Something that learned what empty means. Stories like this are rare. But they're increasing. And they all follow the same pattern. Someone goes to sleep, doesn't wake up, remains in a stable state for weeks, then wakes up changed, not damaged, not traumatized, changed, as if they saw something that rewrote their understanding of reality so completely that they can't function in it anymore. One nurse who's worked with several of these cases said, "They're not broken. They're not crazy. They're just done. Done with this. Whatever this is. Physical reality. Waking life. They've seen what's underneath. And they can't unsee it. So they opt out. Not suicide. Just disengagement. They're here, but they're not here. They're waiting for something. And I don't think it's something good." Meanwhile, the people who continue to experience the phenomenon nightly are adapting. Some have learned to navigate the room. Not physically. You can't move in the room. But mentally, they've learned to recognize its structure, its rules. And they've learned something crucial: the room responds to attention. If you focus on the door becomes more defined. Not visible, but more present. You can feel it more strongly. Sense its location. And if you focus hard enough, you can almost reach it, almost touch it, almost open it. But everyone who's tried says the same thing. The moment you get close, something stops you. Not fear, not resistance, just certainty. Absolute certainty that opening the door is irreversible. That once it's open, you can't close it again. And whatever is on the other side will have access to you. Not just in the room. Everywhere. Always. One person described it like this: "I was right there. My hand was on the handle. I couldn't see my hand. Couldn't see the handle. But I knew I was touching it. And I knew that if I turned it, if I opened that door, I would understand everything. Every question I've ever had. Every mystery. Every unknown. It would all make sense. But I also knew that understanding would destroy me. Not kill me. Destroy me. Unmake me. Turn me into something that can't exist in a world where doors stay closed. So I let go. And I stepped back. And I woke up. And I've never felt more grateful to not understand something in my life. Yet some people don't step back. Some people turn the handle. And when they do, they don't wake up screaming. They don't wake up changed. They wake up calm. Peaceful. And they smile. That's what the family members report. They wake up with a smile. And when asked why, they say the same thing, in different words, but with the same meaning: "I know now. I understand. It all makes sense." And when pressed for details, they don't elaborate. They just smile. And that smile never quite reaches their eyes. Because behind their eyes, there's something else now. Something that wasn't there before. Something that came through the door with them. A support group formed. People who'd experienced the phenomenon. People who'd seen the room. Felt the presence. Some had opened the door. Others hadn't. They met once a week. In person at first. But then people started feeling uncomfortable. They said being in the same room with people who'd opened the door felt wrong. Like standing next to a leak. Like something was seeping through them into the physical world. So the meetings moved online. Video calls. But even that didn't help. People reported feeling the presence through the screen. Through the pixels. As if whatever had come through the door with those people was using them as a bridge. A conduit. A way to extend itself into waking reality. The group dissolved after 3 months. But the connections remained. People who'd been in the group started dreaming about each other. Not about the people. About being in the room with them. Standing together in that empty space. Waiting together. And in those dreams, they could see each other clearly. More clearly than they ever could in waking life. Because in the room, there were no bodies to obscure what they really were. One member of the group wrote a post before disappearing from all online activity. We think we're individuals. Separate. Distinct. But in the room, you can see the truth. We're all connected. We're all part of the same thing. And the thing we're part of is waking up. The room isn't a place. It's a membrane. And on the other side of that membrane is something vast. Something that's been asleep. And we're the dream it's having. And when it fully wakes up, the dream ends. We end. Not die. End. We dissolve back into what we really are. And the room is where that process starts. The post was deleted within hours. But not before hundreds of people saved it, shared it, discussed it, and many reported the same thing. Reading those words felt like remembering. Like being reminded of something they already knew but had forgotten. A theoretical physicist read the post and wrote a response. She argued that if consciousness is fundamental, if it's not produced by brains but exists independently, then perhaps individual consciousness is like a wave on an ocean. The wave feels separate, feels individual, but it's just a temporary formation in the water. The water is what's real. The water is continuous. And when the wave collapses, the water remains. The room, she suggested, is where you glimpse the ocean, where you realize you're not the wave. You're the water. And you always have been. But if that's true, why is the realization so disturbing? Why do people who glimpse it come back changed, damaged, unable to function? Because, she argued, we're not meant to know. Our consciousness is structured to experience itself as separate, as individual. That separation is necessary for survival, for function, for meaning. If you dissolve that separation, if you see through the illusion, you can't reconstruct it. You can't unfeel what you've felt. You can't unknow what you've known. And without that separation, without that sense of being an individual self, you can't participate in the world. Because the world is built on the assumption of separation, of distinct beings interacting. Without that, there's no interaction. There's just merging, dissolving, ending. A monk who'd practiced meditation for 40 years heard about the phenomenon. He read the testimonies, listened to the recordings, and he said something that made researchers pause. He said, "This is what we've been warning about for thousands of years. This is the danger of glimpsing true nature without preparation, without guidance, without the proper framework to integrate it. In meditation, we approach this slowly, carefully. We build the container before we access the content. But these people are accessing it accidentally, during sleep, without preparation, and the container of their individual identity can't hold what they're experiencing. So it shatters. And what's left is someone who's seen the truth but can't live with it. He was asked if he'd experienced the room. He smiled. Not the disturbing smile of those who'd opened the door. A different smile. Sad. Knowing. I live in the room, he said. I've been there for decades. But I learned to exist in both places at once. In the room and in the world. That's what practice is. Learning to hold both. But most people can't. And now they're being forced to. And it's destroying them. He was asked why. Why now? Why are people suddenly accessing this? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had several. Maybe collective stress. Maybe technology disrupting natural rhythms. Maybe we've reached a threshold. Maybe consciousness itself is evolving, and this is the growing pain. Or maybe, he paused, choosing his words carefully, maybe something is calling us there. Maybe the room isn't just a space we're discovering. Maybe it's a space that's opening. And something on the other side is reaching through, pulling us in, one by one. By mid-2025, the phenomenon had reached mainstream awareness. News outlets covered it. Documentaries explored it. Scientists studied it. And the testimonies kept coming. Millions of people worldwide reported experiencing it at least once. And a significant percentage, roughly 15%, reported experiencing it regularly. Every night. Without fail. Those people formed their own subculture. They called themselves waiters. Not as in servers. As in those who wait. They had their own forums. Their own language. Their own rituals. They shared techniques for navigating the room. For extending their time there. For communicating with others in the space. Because that was the new development. People were starting to encounter each other in the room. Not their physical forms. Not their identities. But their presence. They could sense when someone else was there. And some claimed they could communicate. Not with words. Not with thoughts. But with something deeper. Intention. Pure intention, without language to filter it. One waiter described it. You meet someone in the room, and you don't know who they are. You don't know their name, their face, their history. But you know them. You know what they are at their core. And they know you. There's no hiding in the room. No masks. No performance. Just raw consciousness meeting raw consciousness. And it's terrifying and beautiful and impossible to describe to someone who hasn't felt it. The waiters developed a theory. They believed the room was a training ground. That humanity was being prepared for something. An evolution. A transition. And the room was where that transition began. They believed that eventually, everyone would access the room. Everyone would see what they'd seen. Feel what they'd felt. And when that happened, when everyone was in the room at the same time, something would change. Something fundamental. Something irreversible. They called it the convergence. The moment when all consciousness recognizes itself. When the illusion of separation dissolves completely. When the ocean realizes it was never made of individual waves. Just water. Just one thing, experiencing itself in infinite ways. But others warned against this. They argued that the convergence would be the end of humanity as we know it. That individuality is what makes us human. That consciousness without boundaries is just noise. Just chaos. They argued that the room should be avoided. That the door should never be opened. That we should fight to maintain our separation, even if it's an illusion, because that illusion is what makes life meaningful. The debate raged online. In academic circles, in spiritual communities, and all the while, more people kept waking up at 3 a.m., kept feeling the gap, kept returning to the room, whether they wanted to or not. A government agency began investigating. Quietly. They didn't announce it publicly, but they assembled a team. Psychologists, neuroscientists, military strategists. Their concern wasn't philosophical. It was practical. If millions of people were accessing a shared consciousness space, what were the security implications? Could information be transferred through the room? Could people be influenced? Could the phenomenon be weaponized? They conducted classified experiments. Tried to induce the experience under controlled conditions. Tried to map it, control it, understand it. Most experiments failed, but a few succeeded. And what they found disturbed them enough to classify the results at the highest level. One leaked document suggested they'd successfully induced the room experience in test subjects using a combination of electromagnetic stimulation and sensory deprivation. The subjects reported the standard experience: the room, the presence, the door. But then something unexpected happened. One subject opened the door, and when they did, every other subject in the facility, regardless of whether they were part of the experiment, simultaneously experienced the same thing. They all felt the door open. They all felt something come through. And they all reported the same sensation, recognition, as if they'd seen this coming, as if they'd always known this would happen. The experiment was never repeated. The facility was closed. The subjects were monitored. And according to the leaked document, they're still being monitored. Because they haven't been the same since. They function normally, hold jobs, maintain relationships. But there's something different about them. Something in their eyes. Something in the way they pause mid-conversation, as if listening to something no one else can hear. It's not in the room anymore. It's here. It's everywhere. And it's waiting. A philosopher published a paper arguing that the phenomenon represents humanity's confrontation with its own nature. That we've spent millennia building structures, stories, identities to avoid facing what we really are. And now, those structures are failing. The stories aren't holding. And we're being forced to look directly at consciousness itself. Unfiltered, unmediated. And we're not ready for it. She wrote, "We are meaning-making machines trapped in a meaningless universe. We create narratives to make sense of existence. But in the room, narratives don't work. There's no story there. No arc. No purpose. Just existence itself. Raw. Immediate. Eternal. And when you encounter that, when you feel what it's like to exist without story, you can't go back to pretending the story is real. You can't live in the narrative anymore. You're stuck between two modes of being. One that feels real but hollow, and one that feels true but unbearable." Her paper ended with a warning: we are approaching a collective threshold. The room is no longer an individual experience. It's becoming shared, synchronized. And when enough people cross that threshold, when enough people see behind the narrative, society as we know it will collapse. Not violently, not dramatically, but quietly, gradually. As more and more people lose the ability to believe in the structures that hold civilization together. Money, status, identity, nation, all of it requires belief. And belief requires the ability to ignore what's underneath. The room removes that ability. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. The paper was controversial. Some called it alarmist. Others called it prophetic. But no one could deny the pattern she identified. Countries with higher rates of the phenomenon were showing measurable changes in social behavior. Decreased economic activity, decreased engagement with institutions, increased reports of existential distress, people going through the motions but clearly disconnected from the meaning of those motions. One economist noted, it's as if people are losing interest, not in specific things, in everything, in the concept of pursuit itself. They're not depressed. They're not nihilistic. They're just done. Done chasing. Done acquiring. Done competing. And when you ask them why, they can't articulate it. They just say things feel different now. Less important. Less real. A documentary filmmaker spent a year interviewing people experiencing the phenomenon. The film was never released commercially. Too disturbing, the distributors said. But bootleg copies circulated online. And those who watched it reported the same reaction, recognition. The people in the film weren't describing something foreign. They were describing something universal. Something everyone had felt but never articulated. One interview stood out. A woman in her 60s, retired, living alone. She described going to the room every night for 2 years. At first, she was frightened, then curious, then comfortable. And finally, she said, she became grateful. The room showed me something, she said. It showed me that I'm not what I thought I was. My name, my history, my personality, all of it is just clothing. And underneath, there's something else. Something that doesn't have a name. Doesn't need a name. And that something is connected to everything. To everyone. We're all the same thing. We just forgot. The room helps you remember. The interviewer asked, but doesn't that scare you losing your identity? She smiled. Not the disturbing smile. A peaceful one. I haven't lost anything, she said. I've gained everything. I used to think I was a person. Now I know I'm everything pretending to be a person. And when I die, I won't end. The person will end. But I'll continue. Because I'm not the person. I'm what's having the experience of being the person. And that never ends. The interview concluded with her looking directly at the camera. You already know this, she said. Everyone watching this already knows. You've been to the room. You've felt it. You're just afraid to admit it, because admitting it changes everything. But you can't avoid it forever. The room is patient. It's always been there. And it's always waiting. And one night, you'll open the door, and you'll remember. And when you do, you'll realize you've been asleep your whole life. And what you thought was waking is just another kind of dream. And the only way to truly wake up is to stop resisting. To stop fighting, to stop pretending you're just a person. Because you're not. You never were. And the room is where you go to remember what you really are. The footage cut to black, but people who watched it reported feeling something after. A pull, a calling. And that night, many of them woke at 3 a.m. And they were in the room. And they understood. And they couldn't unknow it. And their lives were never the same. By late 2025, the phenomenon had become normalized. People stopped questioning it, stopped researching it, stopped trying to explain it. It simply became part of life. Like dreaming, like breathing. You go to sleep. You go to the room. You wait. You come back. And you don't talk about it, because talking about it makes it more real. And making it more real makes it harder to function in the world that pretends it doesn't exist. But the door remains, always there, always waiting. And more people open it every night. And what comes through is spreading. Silently, invisibly, changing the people it touches. Not violently, not obviously, just fundamentally. They're still here, still walking around, still going through the motions. But they're different now. They know. And once you know, you can't unknow. And once enough people know, once the knowing reaches critical mass, something will happen. Something has to happen. Because two realities can't coexist forever. The one where we're individuals, and the one where we're all the same thing. One of them has to give. One of them has to collapse. And when it does, when the membrane finally breaks, when the room and the world merge completely, we'll all be there together. In the waiting room, where we've always been, where we'll always be, waiting for something that's already here, waiting to remember something we've never forgotten, waiting to become something we've always been. The story doesn't end. It never really began. It's always been happening. You're in it right now, reading these words, feeling something familiar, something you can't quite name, a memory that isn't yours but feels like it should be, a room you've never seen but somehow I recognize, a door you haven't opened but know is there, waiting, calling, promising answers to questions you didn't know you had. And tonight, when you close your eyes, when you drift into that space between waking and sleep, pay attention. Notice the transition. The moment when thought becomes dream, becomes nothing, becomes something else. That's when you find it. The room. The gap. The place where you've always been but never noticed. Until now. And once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. It's there forever. In the back of your awareness. A door you can feel but can't see. A presence you can sense but can't name. A waiting that never ends because it never began. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe the room is showing us something important. Something we've spent all of human history trying to avoid, that we're not in control. That consciousness isn't personal. That the self is a story we tell ourselves to make sense of something that doesn't need sense. And maybe, just maybe, letting go of that story is the only way forward. The only way to evolve. The only way to become what we're meant to become. Or maybe it's a trap. Maybe the room is exactly what the warnings say it is. A dissolution. An ending. A loss of everything that makes us human. And opening that door means surrendering not just our identity but our agency. Our will. Our ability to choose. Maybe what comes through isn't enlightenment. Maybe it's annihilation. Not death. Something worse. Existence without self. consciousness without boundary, experience without experiencer. No one knows. And that's the terror of it. That's what keeps people awake. Not the room itself, but the uncertainty. The not knowing whether to resist or surrender. Whether to keep the door closed or finally open it. Whether to cling to the illusion of self or dissolve into the truth of non-self. Both paths lead somewhere, but neither guarantees arrival. So we wait. In the room. In the gap. In the space between what we are and what we might become. We wait for clarity that never comes. For resolution that never arrives. For meaning that never solidifies. We wait because waiting is all we can do. All we've ever done. All we'll ever do. Until the door opens. Or until we open it. Or until we realize it was never closed to begin with. That we've been on the other side all along. That the room isn't a place we visit. It's the place we live. And waking life is just a brief intermission. A moment of forgetting. A dream within the dream. And when we finally remember, when we finally wake up for real, we'll realize we were never asleep. We were never separate. We were never individuals having an experience. We were always the experience itself. Having itself. Knowing itself. Being itself. And in that moment of recognition, everything changes. Or nothing changes. Because change implies time. And time implies sequence. And sequence implies separation. And separation is the illusion we're here to dissolve. So maybe nothing changes because nothing ever changed. Maybe we're already there. Already awake. Already home. And the room, the waiting, the fear, the mystery, all of it is just the process of realizing what we already are. What we've always been. What we could never stop being even if we tried. When you fall asleep tonight, will you notice what's missing or will you finally notice what's been there all along?